Hey guys, how's it going? It's me, Tony here. I just wanted to make this video for you guys to let you know why I was asking for donations to my GoFundMe for some unexpected car repairs. About 3.5 weeks ago, I was giving a ride to a private client down to Sacramento, and when I pulled off the off-ramp by my house here in Chico after getting back, it said, "Oh, coolant level slightly low, please top off coolant." So I did, and then put a piece of cardboard underneath it because the last time it randomly asked me to fill coolant, I had a blown hose that cost about $1,200 to fix. And turns out the mechanic I went to was somebody who grossly overcharged for their services here in Chico. I'm not going to bother mentioning the business. It's completely irrelevant, but needless to say, they're notorious for padding the bill with billing for way too many hours, and yeah, they're not a very good business in terms of being, ethical. But anyways, so I brought it home. It was just maybe a quarter mile down the road or so. Ended up filling it up with coolant. It didn't really need that much. Put a piece of cardboard underneath it and left it overnight. And came back the next morning, didn't see any fluid on the cardboard. So I drove it, and about 45 minutes later, it said, "Oh, please refill coolant again." And I'm like, oh man. The last time this happened, it was a major expense and it wiped me out. Well, anyway, so I just drove it home, parked it, took it to a mechanic down the road a few hours later. And he told me, he says, "Okay, well, I'm going to do a pressure test on it." He tested it and said, "Oh, one of the outlets on your water pump is going out." And he says the problem is that nowadays all this stuff in these new cars is all made out of plastic because they're trying to save costs, with pressure and temperature treated plastic, but it doesn't last as long as metal, and it don't last forever. So he says, yeah, you could replace just this piece, but then the other one's going to go out and you're going to have to do this job all over again. You might as well just replace the water pump. I said, fine. So I paid to have the water pump fixed. No big deal, right? Got the car back and drove it for about 3 days and kept noticing that there was this smell. It smelled like coolant, but it wasn't saying that my coolant was getting low. Well, my mechanic had mentioned when I got the water pump replaced, he said, well, just to let you know, eventually you're going to have another repair, another weak point in the coolant system that you're going to have to fix. And I said, oh yeah, what's that? And he said, well, these cars are notorious for having a oil filter housing that's made out of plastic. And what happens is, when it gets hot and cold, it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets hot, it gets cold. Eventually the plastic starts to deteriorate and it shrinks. And then there's a coolant line that actually goes, there's a channel for coolant that goes through your oil filter housing. And I said, well, that seems kind of a major design flaw. And he said, well, yeah, it is. It should have its own system, but that's how they engineered them, right? So anyway, once it starts to shrink, it pulls the seal on that coolant line with it, and it puts it over to an area where it's not getting enough, cooling from the coolant, and it pulls it over to somewhere where it's warmer. It just bakes the seal and just takes a piece of rubber and cooks it into a hard piece of plastic that's all melted and it doesn't seal, and that's where your coolant leaks out. He says then on top of that, he says you have to take the intake manifold off to get to it to replace that, and they make an aluminum aftermarket one that is made by a company that machines parts specifically for your car. And I said, okay. He says they're reputable. It's all through WorldPac, the parts supplier. It's genuinely designed for your car. So anyways, he says, you get that one, you put a heavy duty seal on it. He says, you're not going to have to worry about this again for probably another 200,000 miles. I said, okay, great. He says, while you're in there though, because the water pump bolts into a water pump housing, the bolts of the housing are underneath the intake manifold, and you can't get to those without taking the intake manifold off either. So while you have the intake manifold off, it would be in your best interest to just replace that seal while you're there, because otherwise you're going to have to come back and do this all over again just to replace a $40 seal. I said, fine, is there anything else we can do while we're in there? And he said, no, that should be it. You should be good to go after this. and I'm going to make sure to take all your hoses off, check all your hoses, make sure that all your hoses are good, everything. This time, there's not going to be anything left to do with your coolant system. And I'm like, okay, great. He gave me an estimate and put me on his calendar. I had him put me as far out as he could, so that it would give me time to come up with the money. And the quote for which I think it's $1,846.40. Now, I'm not asking everybody to contribute a whole bunch of money so that I can just have the whole thing paid off, without having to actually do anything, just to ask for donations to pay off my car problem. I generally try to work. I've been working 7 days a week for so long now. I'm always tired. It's starting to affect my health. Like, it's just, you can't make enough money here in California, unless, even with a degree now, a lot of employers, they don't really care if you have a degree. So you're kind of wasting your time getting one unless you're in certain fields. And my problem was that, the industries that I'm in, I do a lot of gig jobs. I work for Amazon. I work for a company called Roadie. And everybody said, oh, well, go out and get a real job. Those jobs don't pay enough money. Neither do minimum wage jobs. Minimum wage jobs pay even less. So people, the view from 30,000 feet is always a lot better, and people who are generally in a better position than I am are, the ones who usually say things like that, not realizing that, of course, you're never going to make it on minimum wage in California. You're going to go broke. You can't live. It's impossible. And I hear a lot of, oh, well, McDonald's is hiring for $20 an hour. Yeah, but when they forced the fast food companies to go up to $20 an hour, they slashed a lot of their workforce, and they cut all the employees' hours by half. So now less employees are expected to do more work, and they make the same money now, basically, that they would working 40 hours a week at minimum wage, by cutting their hours in half. They actually make a little bit less. So yeah, that $20 increase was not good for the fast food economy. But I digress. Anyways, going to college and trying to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, sometimes it's not doable, especially with, trying to get my bachelor's of science in microbiology with clinical laboratory science. So it's just been really rough. The gig economy has been it's just progressively getting worse and worse. It's kind of getting flooded with more and more people, and it's very competitive, and I'm staying afloat, and I should be able to get most of the money that I need. I would say that I'm only asking for people to contribute $700, and you figure, that's 70 people contributing $10 or 35 people contributing $20. Anything that anybody can throw down towards the cause would be excellent. Even if I don't hit my goal, it's going to put me that much closer to what I need. And yeah, I'm having a really hard time being able to work, pay my bills, and save money with costs for everything going up, gas going up, just everything's going through the roof. So started growing vegetables to save money on vegetable costs. I'm doing everything I can, and I literally work 7 days a week, minimum 10 to 12 hour days, and it's just eating at me. I'm always tired. If I didn't have to worry about trying to save up all this money for the car repair, I was homeless for a while, and I had to, I was living in the back of my pickup truck in a friend's driveway, and had to work 7 days a week for 3 months to be able to get ahead enough to be able to move into a place, that was safe and really nice place to live, with no homeless people wandering the streets constantly, where I used to live. I actually had my car broken into. It was kind of, well, I guess not broken into, but stuff was stolen out of my car. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, now it's just really hard, even working 7 days a week, to get the money I need together. And I figure I can make about $1,100 of the money. And I've been working hard, saving, not spending anything on anything, just work home, not having any anything to myself. So I'm not trying to give everybody a sob story. I'm just telling everybody where I'm coming from, and that I really am working. And again, I'm not asking for all the money. I'm just asking for people to help out a little bit with what they can to help me towards my goal, because my time that I can work towards saving any kind of money during the month is very limited before I have to start saving money for my car payment, before I have to start saving money for my rent, and there's a very limited window of when I can get this money together. The car is supposed to go into the shop on the 21st of this month, and the guy says he's going to keep it for 3 days, so he's going to give it back to me on the 23rd, I believe, which is a Friday. And I have to ultimately have the money by then to give to him to get it back. But I'd like to have all the money together and lined up, pulled out of the bank in cash, so that I can just have it, waiting to give to him right when I go to pick up the car. No problems, no hassles. So, anyways, if you guys could help out with this, I'd really, really appreciate it. And again, this is just coming from a working class guy who's working himself in the ground trying to get this together. And it'd really mean a lot to me if you guys could find it in your hearts to help me out with this. Thank you guys so much for your time, and any help that you can give would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.